Bill Belichick just wrapped up his press conference. Can you believe a week ago, Chase, the last thing I think we were discussing was the reality of this happening. I think the reports were starting to happen. We were reacting a little bit about it. And people close to him just kept saying, this could happen. This could happen. This time last year, it was Arthur Smith who was actually getting the initial interest, remember? And then it quickly flipped. So here's the thing. Because there's been so many layers to the story, so many tentacles, and so much great information out there, I thought we would team up with our college insider. Of course, you guys all know him, Bruce Feldman here, joining Scoop City now. Bruce, we know it has been a wild 7-8 days almost now for you. So we appreciate you hopping on here. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Diana. It's good to be on with you guys. It's good to see Chase. I remember when I first met him, he was a freshman at Mizzou. Coming out of a high school powerhouse, and I'm not surprised he had a great career. I'm not surprised he's also doing this now. You could tell.
Oh, I appreciate that. Good to have you on, brother.
Nice to hear that. And Chase loves to hear what a star he was. And I like to be reminded that my partner here was a superstar in college because he attends tons of Hall of Fames and we make fun of him here on the show about it. So
right, let's get to the questions.
The more credibility here. I want to just start with just plain old reaction from the people that you're talking to in the college world, whatever level it is that you're talking to of those people. What have you been hearing about just Bill Belichick being a head coach for UNC?
It's somewhat mixed, Diana, but I think one of the big things that comes through is, does he really know what he's getting into right now? Because there's people that have, he's the GOAT of coaching, especially in the NFL. Now, it's different in college. We've seen guys, who have been wildly successful in college and bombed spectacularly in the NFL. And so it wouldn't be surprising if it's coming back the other way where it doesn't translate. I think what's different, and I go back to this about a year ago at this time, Nick Saban surprised a lot of people including people in his own program, that he decided, I'm done. And when you talk to people who were on that staff, a bunch of them had said, look, he had done exit interviews with like 40 players on that team. And they had, basically voiced that, like, it was very frustrating to him to hear their message. A lot of the mentality seemed to be very selfish and didn't jibe with what he was looking for and wanted to hear or had been hearing in all his exit interviews that he'd done in the previous years. Nick Saban is the GOAT of all college football coaches. He is obviously very close, knows Bill Belichick really well. They worked together a long time. But I think the fact that it kind of drove him out and he had just kind of had enough. And now here it is a year later. It's not gotten any more streamlined in terms of the NIL process, the transfer portal. Bill Belichick, and I know this from talking to sources close to him, he can think, oh, yeah, I know agents. I've dealt with a lot of agents and a lot of, his relationships. But these are not the agents he's going to be dealing with in college football. It's like in the NFL side, as you guys know, there's a process you need to be accredited and licensed. There's none of that. All you need to be an agent working in the college space is a cell phone and an internet connection. You don't need any certification. So that's a lot of the people who he's going to be hounded by and managing. And I get it. You have Mike Lombardi, who's going to handle a lot of that. The head coach, I've talked to guys who worked for Belichick who said, twice a year at least, he's going to hear from guys who are wanting to renegotiate. They're going to go to him. And I think that those are some big headaches that he's going to have to deal with as he gets into this job, that I don't think as much time as he spent around Steve and around UW, where his son is the defensive coordinator, he can be in the meeting. He was in the meetings and was around a bunch, but he wasn't around all the recruiting stuff. He wasn't on the recruiting weekends. He wasn't around official visits and dealing with all that stuff. So I think he's been pretty shielded to that reality and all the stuff that doesn't happen with the on the field stuff. Those are the things that I think are probably going to drive him up a wall.
Yeah, I truly think that college coaching, the more I'm around just some of the coaches that I know in college, it's a 365-day-a-year job. And more college coaches are not actually coaching. They're figureheads. They're dealing with their roster. They're dealing with NIL. They're dealing with now the revenue sharing, everything like that. With Bill, he wants to control. So don't you think that, in my opinion, he's sort of evolving and changing in front of our eyes because he's building the first pro-style staff in college. So he has a GM, he has a pro player personnel, which will now be the transfer portal. He has pro scouting, which is now high school scouting. So don't you think it would take some pressure off of him so he can just do what he wants to do, and that is just teach and coach and what he's so good at?
In theory, it would. But like, there's lots of GMs now. Like Nick Saban had that model that he had cultivated, and he had, he had people in place, whether it was Jeff Allen, who's the trainer who was with him the whole time, or Dr. Ginger Gilmore, who is basically an assistant AD who kind of could be the buffer for the players. And I don't want to say it was like good cop, bad cop around Alabama, but there was a lot of layers to it. And I get that. But at the same time, you're not entirely insulated from that. And what you said, Chase, is very true. Like when I go to the combine, and see all the people on the NFL side, I run into a lot of college coaches, former college coaches that I, maybe hadn't seen in a while, or see just that once a year we get beers or something. And their quality of life is way better in the NFL, because they'll say, I do, like if I'm, by the pool with my family in June or July or late in the spring, I don't have to worry about my cell phone.
Yeah.
I don't have to come into the office because some kid has a baseball tournament in the area and now he's going to take an unofficial visit and I have to be there. It's great that the recruiting staff may be there, but the head coach needs to be involved in that stuff. You cannot be just that guy who's doing the drive-bys. And I think, 72 is a real thing. Like that's
yes.
This is not 52. It's way different. And I think, people can say, oh yeah, he's dating a 24-year-old or whatever it is. That's certainly a by choice thing, but all of a sudden now you're going to deal with all the other stuff that, like when you're 72, you're going to have a lot of headaches that you can't delegate all of them.
Yeah,
they're just going to be in his face. And I just think it's going to wear him down in a hurry. I'm not saying, he won't be like his team, I think, is going to be incredibly well coached. Look, we see what Bill O'Brien, one of his proteges, has done. He got BC to 7-5. I think they can win 8 or 9 games. It's the ACC. He's not going in the SEC.
Yeah.
Look what SMU has done in its first year. SMU's collective recruiting average ranking is 70th over the last 5 years. They made the playoff. It's not like he's going, so I think he can have a lot of success. I just think the fatigue factor of dealing with all the BS is going to wear him out.
I know. And Chase and I were joking, our own fathers are in their 70s. And I was telling Chase, my dad gets mad that the couch in my living room is too low to the ground. It's too hard for him to get up. And he's healthy, but he just is annoyed by that because it takes that much more effort to do it. So he can fight it. And look, I covered Belichick for years. His endurance is tremendous when it comes to the work and the focus. In fact, anyone associated with New England that has come from that building on the coaching side specifically, and even scouts, they're machines. They are machine disciplined people. It's true though. Like they're very different than others around the league who have their own styles of attacking preparation for games. But the New England way always just were very almost militant. So I do think if any 72-year-old can handle it, it will be Belichick. But you bring up some great points about just even in the NFL, how people look at the difference in coaching. I was at the league meetings in Dallas when this news broke. Bruce, it was wild how many executives and owners included did not believe it. They're like, there's no way. No way. They were so shocked by it. I kept going, no, this is happening. Like, this was like right before it really broke, and we all knew it was heading that direction. In terms of how you think college kids who you're around, you cover them, you understand the locker room. Chase, you've been around it tons. You go back and you see these kids. How do you think Bill is going to be able to connect with them when he's never had to do it with players this age?
Yeah, I think he's going to have a lot of currency just because, whether he wears one or all of the Super Bowl rings around them, that'll get people's attention. But the coaches I've talked to still say, yeah, but at some point they're going to go, yeah, and how much am I going to get? Like, are you going to pay me this? It still comes back to that. Like Nick Saban lost recruits. Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach ever. He lost recruits to other people. I'm not saying he lost bidding wars, but that's probably what happened. It's the SEC. I think that, I imagine they will get on the right kids who fit for them and fit with them, and not too many knuckleheads that are going to zap his energy. Because if your dad in his 70s didn't like the height of the chair because it's bad on his back, how about if he's dealing with some knucklehead who just can't get right and is constantly on lists? I'm sure that the staff will have ways to keep that headache away from Belichick, but still, the way the recruiting process also works in this, especially when it comes to portal, is these things happen really fast. And so you don't have like the draft evaluation process before guys were picked happens over months, and there's way more intel. And here, I just think it's going to be a much more of a crunch to find out what you're getting. I think he'll be really good with a lot of things. I just think that dealing with this version of 16, 17-year-old kids who are now coming up, now they've heard all the stories about what happens with NIL. The demands are crazy. I'm telling you, the stuff coaches have told me this cycle, it has gotten crazier than it was 2 years ago. And that's not like that toothpaste is not going back in the tube.
Yeah.
It's only getting worse because the agents that most people have never heard of have either tried to set the market or reset the market of what they're trying to get from people and shopping players around. Like, it would blow your mind compared to, like, you guys probably hear crazy stories about NFL agents, but compared to this now, it is amateur hour, and he's going to deal with that. And so one of the coaches I talked to was like, is he really going to give his cell phone out to like 216-year-olds? I mean, is that really what's going to happen? Because you're talking about just that is the world he's going to be living in. Mike Lombardi can't manage all of that. It's got to be the head coach has to be involved.
Look, I don't think he's going to have a problem recruiting, especially the first few years, right? I feel like he's going to get recruits in, obviously, from his Super Bowl rings. I think he's got 8 in total, or just the money. I heard it was upwards to $20 million in an NIL fund, which is absolutely bonkers. I don't know if that's true, but that's the number I heard. I don't think he's going to have a problem recruiting. However, can't you imagine the Patriot way going through now to the Tar Heel way, and it weighing on these 16, 17, 18-year-old players, and then after a year, they're like, I'm out. How is he going to keep those guys around? Because in a day and an age that it's the Wild West, I have no issue with you recruiting. I think it's going to be great. He's going to get the 5 stars. He's going to get those guys. But now they have a full football season, and they're like, oh, this is Bill Belichick? Peace out. I'm gone. Like, how do you see him handling that situation?
I think for the kids who can't handle it, I think he'll be fine with it, and he'll probably want them gone anyway. Like, it's interesting because it's hard to find like a real precedent for this. I mean, you see some parallels. Like, Bill Walsh came back after he won 3 Super Bowls. He was in his early 60s, not in his 70s, but he had some success early on, and then he ended up like a 500 coach, and after 3 years he was done. Pre-portal, pre-NIL, obviously. But then you have, we saw Charlie Weiss took the Belichick way, had some success early on at Notre Dame, and then just fizzled out. You've seen, obviously, Bill O'Brien's done a nice job. I think Chip Kelly's tried to incorporate some similar, like he's tried to recruit off of the same model he once told me of how Belichick operates. But he didn't have the NIL war chest that we think North Carolina, because I've heard similar to what Chase just said, and that's a big piece of it. But I think also it's the, how do they handle it and everything else. I mean, Deion Sanders to me is an interesting, parallel because he's got a high level NFL cachet. Now his personality is way different, but I think how he relates to players and what they manage, and even still, if you could tell me Bill is going to get a Shedeur Sanders who's like, going to be that level of quarterback in college and a generational two-way player that can change. Obviously he's not going to run it like it's a 7-on-7 team where they're great on the perimeter and, really limited in the trenches. But I think that kind of thing, I can see how you can make a big impact and a big splash early. It's just the retention piece of it is,
Yeah.
I think is going to be a very interesting thing to monitor because he's going to make them grind. And I'm not sure how many
That's
of
what I'm
those
saying.
kids
I don't.
want to
Yes.
stay on that.
Well, he said he took the job to be there and not to leave. And
Everybody
he's
says that,
obviously-
Diana.
I
Nobody says
totally
that.
do. I think
I
that's
know.
such a farce.
Do we ever trust anyone in a press conference? No, right? They're saying what they need to say. And, the sense I was getting over the last few weeks in terms of the dynamic between Bill Belichick and the NFL anyways, was he wasn't getting interest. This was a really smart move by him because just in my opinion, I think he knew this would be a bad look if he was going to miss out again in an opportunity. Bill Belichick was not the number one head coaching candidate on the open market. It's Mike Vrabel, the younger version of him, we'll call it, and a different. They're not the same at all, but there's a lot of great qualities about both of them, and teams are going to want a 49-year-old, not a 72-year-old. On top of the fact that Belichick comes with a lot more things that we've all heard about over the years. So the longevity of this, to me, is the most interesting part of it. It's how long is he going to be able to do this? And is he going to be happy doing it? Is this going to be a movie he's going to look back on and go, that just was not the right fit? And even just talking to people around the NFLverse, I've talked to so many people who see both, like everyone is so split on it. And the biggest question, and just in your opinion, it doesn't have to be anything that that you know for a fact, just the why. The why North Carolina when perhaps other opportunities could have opened up or better programs, bigger programs, more of a spotlight, better conferences. Just from your observation, what do you think the answer to the why is there?
I think start with this. There were no other jobs out there. This was a very unusual cycle in terms of like the previous couple of years, it was crazy on the coaching carousel. This wasn't that year. I mean, this was basically the best of a really bad small crop of Power 4 head coaching jobs. There was Purdue, UCF, which just became a Power 4 program a year or two ago, and North Carolina. I mean, it's not like Bill Belichick was going to go to Hattiesburg and be the head coach at Southern Miss or go be the head coach at Marshall. Like West Virginia just opened up. It was like there's not a great pool of coaching jobs. Now, next year, we think there will be. It could be 4 big SEC jobs could come open, but, he's 73 next year. Time is not on his side here at all. Now, part of me would say, I watch him on the Manning cast. I think he's fantastic on that. I learn a ton, of just like these little nuggets that come out of him that he kind of grunts out in the course of this. I think he's both he and Saban, I think, have been terrific additions to the TV sports broadcast world, and I think because of that, but, it's good for the viewer, but I think at the same time, that didn't he said it himself today when somebody asked why he's still doing it. He goes, beats working, because I think at the end of the day, he doesn't want to wear a tie and sit in front of camera and have somebody put makeup on him. I think he wants to be twirling the whistle, and I think that's what works for him. That's what he's best at. I mean, he can be really good on TV, but
He's a football guy, man.
He's a football guy. It's what he's.
It's funny how we thought he was doing the Pat McAfee stuff and all 55 podcasts and shows because we thought that he wanted to connect with the college players coming to the NFL, when in fact he's been trying to connect with the younger demographic, the high school kids, to try to draw them and perhaps other college kids. Right, exactly. Look, I don't think anyone here is going to question the situational, the scheme, the scheme, anything that Bill Belichick's going to bring on the coaching side of it. He can coach, he can teach. No one did more work on the college player when they were a head coach in the NFL than Bill Belichick. So, he's going to take advantage at a level of football where coaching matters, and there's some bad coaching and there's some bad play, and he is going to maximize that. He is going to find ways to manipulate it, and we're going to say every Saturday or whatever nights they're playing because we saw it in the NFL where they're supposed to be the smartest.
When you were saying that, Dinah, something I reminded of, there's a handful of like college defensive coaches I know who are now, two of them are head coaches, one's back in the NFL, but like Dave Aranda, brilliant defensive coordinator, and now he's the head coach at Baylor. Manny Diaz, now going to be his arch rival at Duke, and also Jimmy Lake, who's now back in the NFL. But those guys, like Belichick would sit with them and let them basically just be around, and then he would pick their brains and download them about what they were seeing, what they knew about I think he loved that aspect of it. And I think those guys certainly, loved their time to be exposed to that and to how his mind works. But what you're saying is totally he's probably the ultimate football nerd. And I think all those things are that, again, I just think that's the world he's probably most comfortable in. So why not have your hands in the middle of it?
One more question before this is my last question. You're obviously really well connected with college coaches. What are the reactions around the NCAA about Bill Belichick taking the job? Because I'm sure they are mixed.
They are. I think the people I've talked to have a lot of respect for him, immense respect for him. But even guys, like I texted with a guy who worked for him and is now an assistant coach. And he was like, I still can't believe this. Because it's like, how is he going to process getting hit up twice a year by the same kid on a negotiation? And, that's the thing that where these coaches are dealing with that reality. And that's not something that 5 years ago was on anybody's radar. That's a pretty new thing. And so, it drives them crazy. And they're 40 years younger than him, 30 years younger than him. So I think they're like, how is he going to, but they, this one particular guy I, was trading texts with earlier today was like, but he's the GOAT. I bet he'll be able to figure out.
Yeah, no doubt.
So,
wow. I can tell you, as someone who had to sit in a press room my early years at ESPN as a new NFL reporter, I was assigned to the Patriots in the postseason. And I would sit in that room scared out of my mind. He would give me the death stare if I asked any question outside of what the norm of what they wanted to just be asked. So I'm actually, just from an entertainment factor, I'm interested to see how he's going to handle the student media, the younger people covering the team, and how he's really going to handle a lot of what we'll call the sell job of the college sport, which is obviously very different at the NFL level. Bruce, we could talk to you forever.
Yeah,
you've been such a wonderful guest. Thank you so much. I hope maybe around the draft, we'll bring you back on and just kind of dip into that, and you can share some of your intel and insight and all the stuff that you know. So thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great seeing you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning into Scoop City. If you want to hear more, make sure you like and subscribe. We drop our new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.